when Uttarakhand was created or when it was formed, what exactly were the triggers? How did this bifurcation happen? What was the scenario at that point of time? Because this is some time ago. So if I were to take a step back and go back, so the first fact which I would like to share with you and with your audience is that Uttarakhand was formed on the 9th of November, year 2000. And we are the 27th state in the country. So just as a matter of fact, it's a slightly numerical fact. 2 and 7 is 9. We are formed, as a state. We were born on the 9th of November. And we were a part of erstwhile Uttar Pradesh. Now, what led to the formation of Uttarakhand? So, as you know well, Uttarakhand is largely a hill state. Uttarakhand is so the identity of Uttarakhand is defined by the Himalayan character of Uttarakhand, by the rivers of Uttarakhand, by what हमारी जो लोकल भाषा में हम कहते हैं यहाँ पे कि भाई जल जंगल जमीन, जो उत्तराखंड की जल जंगल जमीन है वो उत्तराखंड की पहचान है. तो our rivers, our forest, our land, the spiritual aspect due to the Char Dhams and Haridwar and Rishikesh, the nationalistic spirit of Uttarakhand. Large number of people, as you know, from Uttarakhand, go and join the armed forces. So this is a little bit the overview about Uttarakhand. But again, to step back into the 90s and even earlier than that, in one simple way, the people of Uttarakhand, particularly the youth, the young and the women, felt that जैसे कहते हैं भाई, हम यहाँ पे अपनी भाषा में कहते हैं कि भाई हमारी जो सुनवाई थी, उत्तराखंड के जो सुदूर इलाके थे उनकी आवाज़ लखनऊ तक नहीं पहुँचती थी, जो कि उत्तर प्रदेश की राजधानी थी. So there was a pent-up demand. It was a very strong feeling due to some of the issues that you raised. You referred to migration several times, in your when you were asking your question, in terms of lack of income opportunities, employment opportunities, the quest for a better living standard, the desire, to do to get out of this drudgery of life in the mountains. And to have तो वो पूरा एक momentum था, and it particularly peaked. So this kept on coming in several decades, but it really peaked in the 90s. And one big inflection point was 1994 on the 1st and 2nd of October in Khatima, in Mussoorie, where all these जो हमारे agitation हुए और तमाम उत्तराखंड के लोगों ने अपनी शहादतें दी. So more than 40 people died, in this agitation for Uttarakhand, demanding statehood for Uttarakhand. And finally, at the end of this long struggle, where, as I said, many people gave their lives, जिसे कहते हैं भाई एक अल्टीमेट, आपने एक बिल्कुल सर्वोच्च बलिदान दिया, आपने शहादत दी उत्तराखंड के लिए. उसके बाद राज्य का गठन हुआ. It was a very, very emotional, and after a lot of tumultuous struggle, that Uttarakhand was finally carved, and that is how the state came into being, as I said, on the 9th of November 2000. So that day is etched in the memory of Uttarakhand. And I want to end by stating here that that particular marker of 9th November 2000 is very, very vital for Uttarakhand. A lot of the policy discourse, a lot of the debate, a lot of the discussion, a lot of the thinking is centered around 9th of November and around the formation of Uttarakhand as a state. तो उसको भी लेके हम खैर बातचीत करेंगे. I hope I managed to answer your question.
Yeah, right. So as in your answer, you are talking about a lot of things that you saw during the pre-bifurcation era of the Uttarakhand, and after that, even you are working with a lot of organizations that work for Uttarakhand and the people there. So, when governments and people decide to divide a state, there are a lot of policy issues and challenges that we see, because obviously there are some problems that is after that we decided to, bifurcate the states. So, what do you think? What are the major policy issues or challenges that Uttarakhand is facing nowadays? And with that, what are the solutions that you think are there available?
I think, Jyoti, of course, coming from your point of view, from the point of view of Policy Innovation Lab, which is so much focused on policy, Naturally, I was expecting that question to take center stage. But where we stand exactly today, and at this point of time, I also want to bring in Ankita Bhandari, and I hope that you have read about her. In fact, the whole country is in a state of rage, and particularly so, the people of Uttarakhand right now, because this very, very horrific tragedy has happened in our state. And at this point of time, I also want to, offer my very deepest and most sincere condolences to the family and friends of Ankita, this 19-year-old girl who lost her life, in very terrible circumstances. But to come back again to your question, about policies for Uttarakhand, I think, in one simple sentence, what I feel today and what I guess a lot of people feel is that the issue is not so much with policies, but the issue is more, and particularly from my standpoint, I think the issue is more. So policy, of course, is always an issue because policy is the framework around, which you build your structures of governance and so on and so forth, and you drive the vision for a state. But even before we talk about policy, I think in the case of Uttarakhand, we need to talk about focus, and we need to talk about direction. And very, very importantly, we need to reflect on the entire issue of implementation. It is not that policies don't exist. And there is also a question, and perhaps, experts can debate that does Uttarakhand need a fresh set of policies, or the existing policies, are there enough? And this is, maybe a 1 day or a 2 day debate. But from my point of view, and I repeat this, I think that again, in the wake of whatever has been going on in Uttarakhand recently, in the recent past, in the past several years, I think, as I said, these three words again, and I repeat them: focus, direction, and very, very important is implementation of policy. So having said that, so that is one piece of my answer, to your question, कि भाई क्या पॉलिसी होनी चाहिए, किस किस्म की नीतियां जो हैं वो उत्तराखंड राज्य में बननी चाहिए, उत्तराखंड की आज की मांग क्या है. But since you asked me that question, I think one big challenge for Uttarakhand today, of course, and again, as you know, we are a Himalayan state, we are a mountain state. So this entire question or this mindset, or this challenge of how you really strike the right balance between economic growth, because economic considerations are paramount. India as a country, we want to reach the $5 trillion mark. Uttar Pradesh has set a target of reaching $1 billion, $1 trillion, GDP. So when the country moves in that direction, naturally, of course, Uttarakhand is a small state, but we can't be left behind. We also need to, move ahead along with the time. So the first question is that of economic growth. But in the case of Uttarakhand, how do you marry these ecological challenges? So, getting this right balance between economy and ecology. And I think that is, a big concern for our government. Of late, the government has also been, and particularly the chief minister has also been talking a lot about striking the right balance between the economic aspect and the ecological, or the sustainability, or the environmental aspect. So, from a policy standpoint, I think, that this is where a lot of the gaps need to be filled. And again, I was speaking about implementation. Now, as you know well, a lot of construction is happening in the Himalayan region in Uttarakhand. We have all policies. We are making this very ambitious Char Dham road, which has, many, many dimensions to it. Of course, it has the element of national security. It has the elements of pilgrimage and so on and so forth, and economic development. But how those roads are being made. So on paper, everything is fine. But फॉर इंस्टेंस मक डिस्पोजल, जो जब आप एक पहाड़ काटते हैं तो उसके बाद में जो इतना सारा मक निकलता है, और आप कल्पना कर सकते हैं कि भाई जब आप लाखों टन मलबा निकलता है, उस मलबे का आप डिस्पोजल कैसे करेंगे. तो फॉर इंस्टेंस ये मैं आपके सामने एक सवाल दे रहा हूँ. तो आई वांट टू क्लोज दिस पीस हियर, विद दिस इकोनॉमी एंड ecology. And then, of course, I was speaking earlier about focus. Where should really Uttarakhand focus? We are going to be reaching also this milestone of 25 years of Uttarakhand's formation very soon, as our country celebrates the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, we spread, move into the next 25 years. For Uttarakhand also, for the next 2 odd years, when we will be celebrating our 25th year. So the aspirations of young people with jobs, employment, skilling, reskilling, lack of opportunities. So there are so many elements around that. And, also the last thing, Jyoti, I want to mention here, because, I can go on and on and on and on. But of course, Uttarakhand, like the rest of the country, has also progressed. But we have, in our own simple language, we call them the plain districts of Uttarakhand, and then we refer to the hill districts of Uttarakhand. And the plain districts of Uttarakhand, as you know well, are Dehradun, the districts of Haridwar, Udham Singh Nagar, and the Tarai belt and all of that. And then you have the hilly districts. So most of the development has tended to take place in the plain areas of Uttarakhand. So if we look at it in totality, it appears that Uttarakhand has progressed economically, which it has, from an overall perspective. But the gaps between the plain areas and the hill areas continue to widen. For instance, per capita incomes between Rudraprayag and Haridwar will be maybe, there's a gap of 3 times. So hum in, how do we, sorry, I tend to slip into Hindi a lot because, we mostly speak in Hindi. But the last thing which I wish to mention is that how do we address these inequalities in growth? How do we bring economic prosperity in a sustainable fashion in the mountain areas of Uttarakhand is, another policy issue. So I think, several perspectives, several dimensions, several ways to look at this policy question of yours.
Yeah. And you also mentioned, development and, how people see this. So I'm going to divert your question to the education. When we talk about development and skills and everything, education comes into the whole picture, right? So I'm going to talk about the education when we talk about specifically Dehradun, right? It's been a big hub for the education. We see a lot of schools and colleges like from the British period. And right now itself, when I talk about, personally, I did my graduation and schooling from Dehradun also, because there are really good colleges and schools are available, right? So Dehradun being the hub and a lot of other cities also in Uttarakhand, being a hub for the education, do you see any chances for the skill development? Because in the case of education, we are moving ahead, Uttarakhand and Dehradun, right? But do you see any space for the skill development for the people?
I think it's important that when we look at this question of education, we are very clear in our minds that, are we talking about Dehradun or are we talking about Uttarakhand? So the first thing is that Dehradun is not Uttarakhand. I think that's very, very vital that, we keep that in mind, that amongst the 13 districts of Uttarakhand, the district of Dehradun is just one district. And within that district and within the state of Uttarakhand, Dehradun, of course, it's the capital. It's the interim capital. By the way, Uttarakhand still does not have a capital. 25 साल के बाद में भी 23 साल के बाद में भी उत्तराखंड राज्य के अभी तक राजधानी नहीं है. तो ये भी एक एक सवाल है उत्तराखंड राज्य के लिए कि भाई हमारे पास आज तक राजधानी नहीं है. हम आज तक जो है राजधानी के मसले को ही नहीं सॉल्व कर पाए. So I'm going back a little bit, to your question of policy. I think this is another very big question of, because this is the question also of your identity. Where is your capital? Do you have a capital? We still don't have a capital. Anyways, to come back to your question of education, see, okay, Dehradun, the boarding schools of Dehradun, the boarding schools of Mussoorie, the boarding schools of Nainital, they've occupied a place of pride nationally, and also, large number of young people, students from across the globe also come and study here, which is fine, and that is something, very, very welcome. I am also a product of, some of these very fine institutions which the Doon Valley has to offer. So, and, so good luck with that. And they continue to do a good job, by and large, they continue to do a good job. But when we look at, the macro picture, Jyoti, I think, when we talk about education in Uttarakhand or education in any state for that matter, we cannot, of course, confine our bandwidth, or our answers only to these very fine boarding schools. So I want to, move one or two steps ahead of that. And I want to, for instance, talk about, government schools. So, I'm sort of changing the marker a little bit. And for today's conversation, I just picked up some data with me, and so this is भाई 15 वर्ष में 5 लाख से अधिक छात्रों ने छोड़ा सरकारी स्कूल। तो भाई ऐसे क्या कारण हैं कि हमारे जो सरकारी स्कूल हैं उसमें 15 सालों में जो है 5 लाख छोटे बच्चों ने स्कूल ही छोड़ दिया। तो जहां एक तरफ भाई उत्तराखंड इज वेरी वेरी प्राउड एंड राइटफुली सो ऑफ इट्स बोर्डिंग स्कूल्स, but when we talk about policy, when we talk about institutional reforms, when we talk about policy reforms, I think these are very very sort of serious matters. So in the year 2002, say about 20 odd years ago, from class 1 to class 8 in the government schools of Uttarakhand, we had 9,26,000 students, which are currently at 4,41,000 students. So we have lost 5 lakh students, whereas the number of schools have actually increased marginally by 2,000, and the number of teachers have also gone up by almost 200-300 teachers have gone up. So अब ऐसा भाई क्या कारण है? Are we not able to provide quality education in our government schools? So, and everyone cannot afford to go to a private school. We know that of course, on the one hand the country is progressing, Uttarakhand is progressing, but still for many people to send their children to or their wards to private schools, it takes a lot of money, and so on and so forth. So that is one grave issue which I want this conversation. The other thing you also referred to was some of these private universities, and they're doing a very very good job. I'm very happy to know, as you also shared with me, that you are a product of one of the city-based universities, and all credit to them. These are major entrepreneurial success stories, and they are doing a very very fine job. Personally, also, I am quite familiar with the working of several of them. Get to go there often, and always I marvel at the work that they are doing. So again, full marks to them, but more at a macro landscape, I think there is lots and lots that needs to happen. There are many many state universities in Uttarakhand. Oh, what is the quality of education that we are providing? These are very very sobering question. What is the kind of products that are coming out of these universities? And of course, these are not only Uttarakhand centric issues or answers. This is more or less, as we all know, are national realities, not only specific to Uttarakhand, but since we are, our conversation is centered around Uttarakhand. So this is of course a matter of concern कि भाई आपका जो प्रोडक्ट निकल करके आ रहे हैं वो ठीक है, वो एम्प्लॉयड तो हैं, बट वो कितने एम्प्लॉयबल हैं, उनका स्किल सेट क्या है? I also want to now shift gears a little bit, Jyoti, and speak about the mindset of the average Uttarakhandi. And in fact, this is also, we can link that to skilling, reskilling, shifting priorities, setting the agenda, because I think each state and region has some sort of, particular DNA. Sabka apna apna DNA hota hai. And of course, we can't paint a region in broad strokes or in broad colors. But for instance, and this is well known and well recognized, that many people from Uttarakhand want to go and join the armed forces. And that is something, I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of the fact that, people from my state, young, boys and girls, they really want to give, their best in their lives when needed to the country and, make us feel secure. Anyways, one peculiarity with the youth of Uttarakhand is their fascination for government jobs. So are we able to tweak that? Because सरकार में नौकरियां तो है ही नहीं है भाई, पूरी सरकार यही बात करती, चाहे देश की सरकार है चाहे राज्यों की सरकार है, कि भाई आपको तो स्वरोजगार के बारे में सोचना है, आपको सेल्फ एम्प्लॉयमेंट के बारे में सोचना है, आपको एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप के बारे में सोचना है. So I think this is one area where Uttarakhand has to do a lot of work. And I think a lot of the work has to happen, before we talk about skilling and reskilling, I think a lot of the work has to happen in changing the mindsets of the young people of Uttarakhand. So I think this is also, again, I don't know, if this is a part of your of the answer that, you were expecting, but I'm sharing, what I feel, what I sense, what I see, कि ये मुझे लगता है पॉलिसी के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से भी एक हमारी बहुत बड़ी जिम्मेदारी होनी चाहिए कि हम लोगों की सोच को बदलने की भी कोशिश करें कि भाई आप एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप की तरफ, सेल्फ एम्प्लॉयमेंट की तरफ जाइए, क्योंकि ये जो नौकरी के जो कन्वेंशनल मॉडल्स थे वो खत्म हो रहे हैं। तो ये भी एक मुझे लगता है एम्प्लॉयमेंट के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से हमें सोचने की जरूरत है। एंड द लास्ट थिंग व्हिच आई वांट टू मेंशन हियर इज, वी स्पोकन अबाउट द फाइन बोर्डिंग स्कूल्स ऑफ देहरादून, मसूरी, नैनीताल. We've spoken about some of these excellent private universities in Uttarakhand. But even today, Jyoti, a large number of bright people who do very well in their whatever, when they pass out of school, they are still not studying here in Dehradun. They are choosing to go to Delhi University, or the ones who can afford are going abroad, or so many other private universities have also come up, like, I don't want to name them, but you know them so well. चाहे वो क्रिया होगा, अशोका होगा, शिवनदार होगा, there are so many of them. So still, there is brain drain. There is still brain drain about that. So I think, I can go on and on, but I should take a break here.
Got another question from your answer itself. Like you were talking about the self-employment that should be done in the Uttarakhand, or changing the mindset of people. So with your experience, as you are working with your own organization, and it's been really long that you are working with people, in the employment sector, or maybe the skill development, what do you think, what kind of skills that are important that can help people specifically in Uttarakhand, in case of revival of culture, or maybe providing employment, or other lot of things? What are the skills that you think that are major?
आपने ना ज्योति बड़ा अच्छा सवाल पूछा है। मुझे लगता है कि जो स्किलिंग होनी चाहिए लोगों की, वो आपकी ताकत के साथ होनी चाहिए। तो भाई, उत्तराखंड की ताकत क्या है, उत्तराखंड मजबूत कहाँ पे है, उत्तराखंड का भविष्य कहाँ पर है? सो अगेन, we all know for a fact that and again, अब टूरिज्म को भी लेके उत्तराखंड में बड़ी बहस हो रही है, स्पेशली अंकिता भंडारी के इस गास्टली मर्डर के बाद में. But I would like to come to that also later. Perhaps if you have a question or so on tourism, we can also discuss that. But tourism, agriculture, horticulture, climate, environment. So and again, see, if I were to just take a short break here and just talk about tourism. So tourism also, for practitioners of tourism, there are many variations and variety of tourism. So you can have weekend tourism, or you have the pilgrimage tourism, but you also have adventure tourism. So there are so many other kinds. Wildlife tourism. There is so much around tourism. Mountaineering, trekking, river rafting. तो भाई, आपकी ताकत तो यही है ना, योगा, spirituality, आपकी यही ताकत है. So if I were to, because when I'm answering your question here, in my mind, what I'm trying to do is I'm looking at, so your question is, where do we need to focus on the skilling part? So this is my skilling sort of my toolbox for skilling, and I should, I think that's a more logical way to look at it, that I should be able to, I or we or the state, should look at the skilling toolbox and really link it to your strength. Where are your strengths, and how can you dovetail the two so you can maximize the outcome? It's all about maximization. So जो भी आपका resource है, तो I think उत्तराखंड की inherent strength क्या है? उत्तराखंड की inherent strength यही जो 2-3 मैंने आपके साथ में शेयर करी. भाई, टूरिज्म है, आपका एग्रीकल्चर है, आपका हॉर्टिकल्चर है, आपकी बागवानी है, आपका उद्यान है, आपका भाई, we can't, in the hilly areas, you can't go and set up a automobile factory for the Tatas, right? You can't do that. So that is one. The other thing also, Jyoti, that I think sometimes I can also call it a mistake that we are making on mistake, or we are not. I think when we are talking about policies, we also, even though we have one Uttarakhand, but we should think about the plain areas of Uttarakhand in a different way. We should think about the hill areas of Uttarakhand in a different way. The policy that we are making for the plain areas should not be for the hills, and vice versa. So in one way, we need 3 sets of policies. A, we should be wearing the big hat, the big strategic hat, where we are talking about Uttarakhand as a whole. So that is one. At the next level, we should be talking about the hills of Uttarakhand. And at the next level, we should be talking about the plain areas of Uttarakhand. So if I were to come to the plain areas of Uttarakhand, you'll be surprised to know how big the pharma industry is in Uttarakhand. And I think this is a success story of Uttarakhand, which the world does not know. I think Uttarakhand, we in Uttarakhand, and Uttarakhand as a state needs to talk about its, a glorious success story with the pharma industry or with the pharma business. I think we are the pharma factory of the world, but we don't really talk about it. So there's a lot of now. Again, because everything also of course starts with policy. So I think if we are strong here now, this is a job maybe for the policy makers of the state, and I shouldn't say maybe, I think it should be a job for them to see that in the pharma value chain, is there any way that we can expand? Is there any way that Uttarakhand as a state can add more value? What else can Uttarakhand do? Has Uttarakhand maximized its most? When we talk about medicine, when we talk about pharma, आपको भी पता है, मुझे भी पता है कि आने वाले टाइम में जैसे आयुर्वेद है, होम्योपैथी है, देखिए दुनिया में तो बीमारियों ने बढ़ना ही बढ़ना है, और लोगों ने आने वाले टाइम में यही चीजें सबसे महत्वपूर्ण होने वाली है कि भाई साफ सुथरी हवा, आपका आयुर्वेद, आपका ये भी आपकी स्ट्रेंथ है, आपका स्किलिंग इसके इर्द गिर्द होना चाहिए. I also want to share one data with you, Jyoti, at this point of time. And this, of course, I don't know if it links to skilling or not, but I think this is an important data. Uttarakhand's the valuation. So there is also a valuation of the eco services provided by Uttarakhand on an annual basis. And I'm pleased to share with you that we are providing, and these are government figures. The government of Uttarakhand had asked IIFM, Indian Institute of Forest Management, Bhopal, to conduct a study on the value of the eco services being provided by Uttarakhand on an annual basis. And the answer was an astounding 95,000 crore rupees per annum, which in billion terms is 12-13 billion US dollars. Now, these are massive numbers. These are massive numbers. And this is far more than the annual budget of Uttarakhand. This is more than the total debt on Uttarakhand. So, अब ये भी एक देखिए, मैं तो हर चीज को पॉलिसी से लिंक कर रहा हूँ, क्योंकि पॉलिसी इनोवेशन लैब से मेरी बात हो रही है. भाई भारत सरकार ने एक आया कि भाई 2070 तक तो इंडिया को नेट जीरो होना है. Are there any opportunities? How can we encash our climate? How can we encash our strength? So there are many sort of items which overlap with each other. There are many thoughts, and I hope I have not jumbled up my answer. But whatever is spontaneously coming to my mind, I'm just sharing with you. So we have to essentially weave all these pieces together. We have to, so it's like a jigsaw puzzle. And as I said, you look at Uttarakhand, you look at the hill areas, you look at the plain areas, you merge the strengths and you see, what you can do where and what you can do better. And then, you sort of, build the whole story. So there has to be a lot of fluidity around it. There has to be a lot of creativity around it. There has to be a lot of innovation around, building a state, going ahead. And we can't really, when you talk about 1 crore 35 lakh people, we can't really be straight jacketed, and very, so we have to be very round in our approach and, look at our strengths and then move around or move ahead.
Yeah, actually, you answered my 2-3 questions in your one answer. Like it's being a tourism or the education or the skill development. So I think it's very tough, to conclude all your experiences in this short interview. You have seen a lot.
मैंने आपको confused तो नहीं कर दिया, सच्ची बता.
No. To be honest, I am not. Actually, I had the questions on tourism and everything. I was thinking of asking, but you already